discuss this now with Elizabeth Dickinson. She's the Interim Deputy Director at Latin America's International Crisis Group, joining us live from Bogota in Colombia. First, I want to get your thoughts on everything we've seen unfold throughout the day. Trump's decision to first attack Venezuela and then to remove Maduro and his wife from the country.
Yeah, well, this is obviously the result of mounting pressure that began in August. First, of course, with the attacks on speedboats alleged to have carried drugs, then the seizure of tankers carrying oil, sanctioned tankers carrying Venezuelan oil. And of course, today's strikes are the culmination of that pressure against Nicolas Maduro. The U.S. administration has just released the indictment of Maduro, who was indicted in New York. We understand that is where he is on his way to. But for us, the real question is looking back at Venezuela and the broader region, what is the plan next? What is the plan for the day after? By all indications, the rest of Maduro's government, his ministers, his vice president, remain in a situation of control and power, which could imply that the actual direct change from this operation could be limited. Of course, a government is more than one person, and we have learned through really numbers of experiences of intervention militarily to remove governments, that unless the sort of fundamentals of a situation are changed, it is very difficult to see a peaceful transition. And so the question really is now, what plans or what precautions were taken by the United States to ensure that there is some sort of peaceful transition that guarantees the fundamental rights of Venezuelans and prevents us from sliding into a situation that I think the region very much fears, a situation of destabilization. We've seen expressions of concern from across the region to that effect. Colombia sending reinforcements of troops to its borders, being concerned about the potential of new waves of migration, strong statements from the presidents of Brazil and Mexico regarding this attack, whereas others who have been more aligned with President Trump, such as Milei in Argentina, the president of Argentina, welcoming this operation. So I think we see the polarization politically across the region, and everyone is watching these next 48 hours really to understand where this goes from here.
I want to talk a bit about Maduro's political influence within the country. Does removing him from the country mean that he no longer has any political influence?
Well, we're really not sure his situation at the moment. Certainly, if he's on trial in the United States, he would likely be limited to the situation of normal individuals who are incarcerated in the United States. Possibility of communication, certainly with a lawyer, but of course his influence in Venezuela could be affected. But again, I really want to emphasize here that the government of Nicolas Maduro was more than one person. Two people in this case, Nicolas Maduro and his wife. We have really powerful structures behind this government that have facilitated its perpetuation in power for over a decade, that really will underlie this transition and determine where this goes next. Look at the security structures, for example, in Venezuela. The Maduro government and before him the government of Hugo Chavez, they spent really years trying to fortify the security apparatus from divisions and fissures. They did that through rewarding loyalty, for example, through patronage, economic benefits, and really clamping down on anyone who spoke out against the regime. Very sort of brutal repression of any dissent within the security forces themselves. So their reaction as well to these events will be vital in the hours going ahead.
And of course, there's currently a lot of uncertainty within the country, but what does this mean for Venezuelans? In what way could this impact their lives?
You know, I think, again, it's very early to say. We have a real mix of emotions, I think, from those we've spoken to on the ground. Of course, as your correspondent mentioned, I think a lot of concern and fear about what happens in the immediate term, how to secure access to basic goods, who takes control of critical infrastructure services, how do you guarantee sort of day-to-day security? At the same time, of course, you know, there is a part of the Venezuelan population and the diaspora certainly that welcomes this change, seeing it as a potential window to open towards a transition. And of course, we've seen the statement from Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the opposition, in that regard. Again, you know, I think the proof will be in the coming hours how this unfolds next.
Indeed, and a lot of comparisons have been made throughout the day on Trump's actions there in Venezuela to previous U.S. action on international soil, mainly to the actions that were conducted, its invasion of Iraq, given Venezuela being a country that has key oil and rare mineral resources. How do people feel about the prospects of the U.S. having control essentially over those resources?
So for the moment, there's not an indication that these strikes would continue. However, I think let's wait to hear what President Trump says. But this question of control of these resources and also of critical infrastructure is vital. And that is, as you mentioned, a lesson that we've learned across past military interventions by the United States. Venezuela is a complex context because, of course, we have the security forces, which have been bounded together really by the patronage throughout up and down the system of rents coming from the oil sector, but also from illegal mining and other activities such as trafficking. So, what happens if they stop getting paid? Where are the divisions there? We also have, of course, the presence of a number of arms non-state criminal groups in Venezuela. The most notable is which is known as the ELN. That's a Colombian rebel group, but with a very significant presence in Venezuela. The ELN has previously said that they would come to the defense of the Maduro government should it be threatened, including against U.S. pressure. So their reaction will also be critical in these coming days, something that affects not only Venezuela, but neighboring Colombia as well, where the ELN has a significant presence and ability to carry out operations.
Indeed, and I want to get your thoughts on the precedent that now Trump has set by conducting these attacks in Venezuela. What does this mean for neighboring countries, especially as we hear statements like Mexico is next? It's first of all really important to understand that very few countries in Latin America had recognized the re-election of Nicolás Maduro in 2024, when a vote was held that the opposition won, but was not recognized by the government. So this is a man who did not have a lot of friends in Latin America. Despite that, however, I think that the long experience of U.S. intervention, and as you mentioned, the precedent that this could set, have really left a sour taste in the mouths of a number of countries around the region, who will now be looking, I think, with great trepidation at the willingness of the U.S. administration to utilize force to secure its interests in the region. That is a very powerful and coercive message that I do think will change the dynamic across the region and certainly countries' incentives to cooperate or not with Washington. Okay, the Interim Deputy Director at Latin America's International Crisis Group, Elizabeth Dickinson, thank you so much for being with us here on TRT World and sharing that analysis with us.